Our heads meet in the quiet, whispered Akın Akınözü, and that one line sent the gossip universe spinning. Not because it was loud or flashy, but precisely because it was gentle, anchored, and utterly certain. The moment he said it about Ebru Şahin, old chapters people swore were sealed fluttered open in a rush of memories and comparisons. What changed? Why did a calm confession ignite so much noise? And what does it really say about how Akın has grown, and what Ebru means to him now? Hello everyone and welcome to Turkish series Stars. Before we dive into the story that has the industry buzzing, make sure you're subscribed and ready, because what you're about to hear isn't just rumor. It's a deeper reading of a bond that has quietly redefined a man who once kept everything close to the vest. If you're ready, let's begin. In a recent interview, without theatrics or grand gestures, Akın shared a few simple thoughts about his relationship with Ebru. He talked about calm, about choosing privacy over spectacle, about how they support each other's work without losing themselves in the spotlight. And then came the part that changed the tone of every conversation that followed. He described Ebru as grounded, emotionally steady, and the kind of person who nudges him toward his best self. No fireworks, just certainty. No slogans, just honesty. And that is exactly why it hit like thunder. Because in those words, fans and commentators alike heard something else. A closing of one cycle and the beginning of another. They heard the end of the unspoken tug-of-war between the versions of Akın the public thought they knew, and the version he's choosing to be. They heard the answer to a question that people kept asking for years: what kind of love fits a man who built a career on mystery and intensity, then slowly stepped away from noise? The entertainment world tends to reward spectacle. Public handholds and dramatic exits, cryptic captions and midnight sightings. But what Akın and Ebru have chosen is different, a relationship built in soft tones, not bold headlines. They opt for mornings with coffee at home instead of front row displays. They disappear to unremarkable little corners of the world, where the view matters more than the camera angle. And when they do appear at an event, there's no forced choreography. Only ease, eye contact, and the quiet, subtle shorthand of two people who have learned each other's rhythms. Ask those who observe them closely, and you'll hear the same thing said in a dozen different ways. Ebru's calm is not passive, it's active, protective. She doesn't drown a room with presence, yet somehow centers it. She doesn't push him to be seen, she nudges him to be whole. And for a man whose work thrives on intensity, that balance is priceless. It's not that he needed saving. It's that he chose alignment. Of course, when a public figure praises his partner so deliberately, the first reaction is to line the present beside the past and measure. Social media lit up with three running interpretations. One camp sighed, but what about the passionate, all-consuming kind of love? Isn't that his story? Another swore, the steady, private setups always felt like his lane. And a third, more insistent than the rest, declared, at last, he's found someone who matches his interior world. Let's talk about those interior worlds. In the early days, there was a version of romance that belonged to youth, visible, glittering, and urgent. The kind that looks perfect in pictures but carries too many eyes, too many expectations, and too little air. It was vivid and thrilling, a torch that warmed and burned in the same breath. When the schedules got relentless and the spotlight got hotter, tenderness turned into work, and work turned into pressure. Even love, when overshared, can feel heavy. The lesson wasn't that it wasn't real, but that it wasn't sustainable. Some stories blaze, then become memory. Then came a different chapter, the long, quiet one. It seemed poised to last, fed by patience and privacy. It made people whisper about rings and timelines. It was supportive. It was orderly. It checked boxes. And yet, somewhere within the comfort, the pulse faded. Two good people, a careful life, and a feeling that the relationship could shelter them, but not elevate them. Growth stalled. Affection stayed. The will to evolve, perhaps, did not. There's a difference between tranquility that heals and quiet that dulls. That is the lesson that stayed with him. So when Akın speaks now about Ebru, there's an intentionality in his words. He keeps using terms that signal structure. We keep things to ourselves, we cheer each other on, we're aligned in how we see life. He talks about maturity not as age, but as capacity, the ability to hold space for two full careers, two very public images, and still build a private existence that doesn't feel like a compromise. This isn't a love raised on extremes. It's a love that lets him be intense in his work and soft in his home. People around them, those who've watched the change up close, say there's a distinct pattern. They carve out time that isn't negotiable. They don't perform intimacy online, they live it offline. If she visits his set, it's not a spectacle, it's a check-in, a look, a shared meal tucked between long takes. If he shows up for her, he does it without narrative, without the need to prove anything. And when there's friction, it doesn't turn into theater. They choose solutions, not scenes. Harmony, not hush. Energy, not exhaustion. That's why the sentence that echoed across fans about their thoughts moving at the same pace felt like more than a compliment. It felt like a thesis. Not that the past was lesser, but that this is the first time the internal pieces really lock. The remark that she drives him in the right ways, as he put it, landed as a quiet revelation. Here is a woman who doesn't merely stand beside him, she mirrors his best self back to him. The comparisons were inevitable, not because anyone craves drama, but because the timeline demands context. The early, radiant chapter, unforgettable, yes, but too public to breathe. The long, steady chapter, safe, yes, but too static to soar. Now, a partnership that steals no oxygen from either career and adds a calm pulse to the noise. The maturity in his tone tells you more than any paparazzi shot ever could. He's not tallying highs and lows, he's acknowledging a match. What changed in him to make such a statement possible? Almost everything that mattered. Over the last few years, he intentionally turned down the volume. He trimmed his social circle. He let the clamor fade. He moved toward nature, toward discipline, toward a routine that feeds craft over spectacle. The man who once thrived on motion learned to love stillness. And in that stillness, he recognized the shape of a bond that wouldn't crowd him, wouldn't dim him, wouldn't ask him to choose. And because this is the world we live in, the next question was immediate. Is this quiet certainty the preface to a louder step? We've all heard the whispers. Conversations about forever have happened, day-to-day lives have meshed, families have seen enough to believe. None of this is announced with fireworks. It's evident in the way they plan, in the way they move around each other, in the simple ease of shared routines. The rumor mill will call it strategy. Those who know them call it readiness. It's important to say this out loud. The heart of his declaration wasn't a ranking of the past. It was an unveiling of the present. He wasn't hinting at who fell short, he was naming what finally fits. Sometimes the most gracious way to close a door is to open a better one with care. He did that with a handful of unpretentious sentences that said everything. If you trace the arc, it looks like this: the glow and heat of young love, the careful patience of a long stretch that nearly was, the reset, and finally, the equilibrium. Ebru didn't erase anything. She tuned the frequency to match the man he has become, focused, selective, and rooted. Together, they choose pace over rush, intention over impulse, privacy over performance. And in that space, their breath falls in sync, the same tempo, the same softness, the same forward motion. Pay attention to the language he uses when he describes their days. It's all verbs of building, protecting, learning, aligning, encouraging. He mentions rest as often as he mentions work. He laughs more in interviews now. He diverts probing questions with grace instead of defensiveness. He looks like someone who knows exactly where his anchor is. People who search for crisis in that composure won't find it. That, too, is a choice. Still, the magnetism of comparison persists because it is human to measure. Some fans insist that nothing will ever outshine the intensity of his earlier romances. Others argue that the relationship that lasted the longest deserves a different kind of respect. But the loudest voices now are the ones saying the obvious: the only comparison that matters is the one he makes with his own evolution. He has traded volatility for depth, repetition for growth, and the high of attention for the quiet of commitment. You don't need a press release to recognize that kind of transformation, you just need to listen. Insiders note something else. As both of their careers scale up, the pressure to present a picture-perfect narrative has grown. And yet they resist it. There's no manicured timeline, just consistent action. No hunger for spectacle, just a dedication to show up when it counts. They let the work speak loud and the love speak low, and somehow both are easier to hear because of it. Maybe that's why one grounded statement could move an entire conversation. It wasn't the word calm that rattled people. It was the confidence underneath it. Calm isn't a pose for them, it's infrastructure. It's the mood of Sunday afternoons and airport reunions and long drives with no destination. It's the tone of phone calls that start with "I'm here" and end with "I've got you." It is the respect of two people who learn to place boundaries around what matters and invite no one else across the line. So where does this story go next? If you listen between the lines, you can hear a future being planned in practical steps rather than promises. They have folded their lives together without making a spectacle of it. They're preparing for bigger chapters without leaving breadcrumbs for the world. And yet the excitement leaks out anyway, because assurance always does. The hush becomes its own kind of headline. Let's be honest, some watchers hoped the past would return for one last dance. But nostalgia is a romantic editor. It exaggerates color and blurs the strain. Life happens in focus. And right now, the clarity is undeniable. The man who once kept every feeling under lock has learned how to express certainty without inviting chaos. The woman who could command a room knows how to keep a sanctuary. Together they've proven something that glossy stories rarely admit: the absence of drama can be the greatest proof of love. So yes, a single sentence from Akınözü bent the conversation. Not because he declared a winner among ghosts, but because he named what finally brings him home. Ebru Şahin isn't a rebuttal to his past, she is the alignment of his present. And in their day-to-day, away from flashes and filters, they keep choosing the same answer: a steady pace, a private promise, a shared breath. Now it's your turn. What do you think that calm certainty points to? Do you hear the outline of a bigger step? Can you see how their values and routines are already building the bridge to it? Drop your thoughts below, I read them all. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Turkish series stars, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Until then, remember, sometimes the quietest love makes the loudest truth.